Hello and welcome to the third Futurephonic Podcast. I'm Alex.
And I'm Sam.
And today we're going to be taking calls, giving audio advice, chatting to artists, and giving away free shit. I had a great chat with...
Free good shit.
Yeah, good shit, man. I had a chat with none other than R0verb. That wakes you up in the morning. It's a great way to wake up. He's so full of life and energy. We talked about his past, present, future. We talk about his thoughts on getting heard by bigger labels, which pertains to one of the questions that we've been asked today. And yeah, we're also giving away a free copy of the Klevgrand, it's spelled Rôverb.
I'm not sure how you pronounce the O with the arrow on top. I think Rôverb.
Well, I happen to be engaged to marry a linguist. She gave me a very authoritative response on this, actually, and it's actually pronounced
R0verb.
And I actually really love this company. I got into them through their DAW cassette plugin because I actually record a lot of stuff to cassette. It's fun to get my hands dirty, record out of the box. I love the physical process of that, but it kind of drifts and that hiss really adds up really quickly. So they've got this plugin called the DAW cassette, which gives it that kind of cassette-like wonkiness. We actually approached them about the Rôverb because it's probably a little bit more trance, and it's a really cool thing that we'll be going through at the end of the show.
Yeah, the DAW cassette thing is really cool. I find it quite hard to find good plugins of that sort of variety. There used to be a really good one called Sonitex by, I think they're called Otium Effects, but I think they've gone out of business because it's not been updated to 64-bit. But finding good vinyl emulation plugins are quite hard. There's a few free ones, but they're pretty standard. They just layer a sample of vinyl over the top.
Yeah, it's a lot of tape emulations. Everyone's trying to get the sound of proper Studer reel-to-reel tape. When I want tape sound, I want tape sound. I don't want subtle. I just want this is what it sounds like going through a cassette, maybe twice. So it's great to have a plugin which it's not subtle. It's in your face tape sound. They're not paying me to say this, by the way. I just honestly love their stuff. Speaking of plugins, very little update on the Quadrifuzz thing. I spoke to Greg Ondo. He's one of the sort of head honchos at Steinberg. He's basically forwarded my impassioned search for Quadrifuzz onto the Steinberg product management team. So I tensely await further correspondence. It would be great though, wouldn't it? Imagine if off the back of it, they were well, we finally caved into all the pressure and we're going to do it.
That'd be so good, dude. Yeah, if they re-release that, I think there's going to be a lot of happy bunnies out there in the psytrance scene, man, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
We've also had a few messages from people who can get it working on various systems, etc. I was never saying that it's impossible to make it work, but there's no reliable way of getting it to work on every platform. We need a Quadrifuzz, just works anywhere all the time, no questions asked.
Yeah, that'd be so good if that happens. That'd be awesome.
I actually wanted to read something out that a friend of mine wrote because I found it really inspirational. It's quite rare that something actually really gives me pause for thought, and I love what she wrote. She's a good friend of mine. Her name's Hazel Gale. She's a hypnotherapist, and she wrote recently, studies have shown that when we spend too much time wishing for what we want, as in visualizing the positive outcome, the A+, the gold medal, the standing O, the setup boom, I'll throw in, we actually decrease our chances of achieving those things. These findings fly in the face of what so much self-help advice has told us to do in the past, and some still does now. But it's easy to see why we've fallen into that trap. It feels like a very positive thing to imagine ourselves at the end of the rainbow, showered in glory, our hard work finally paying off. But that feel-good factor is exactly the problem. We get a little bit of dopamine, it's a pleasure hormone, when we see ourselves already having succeeded, and that can satisfy our lust for achievement just enough to numb the drive to do the actual work. The other problem with the pot of gold approach is that it makes everything binary. Either I get my A+, gold medal, standing O, setup boom, or I have failed. This win-or-lose thinking can add an unbearable amount of pressure and therefore increase the chances of procrastination, etc. So what should we visualize? Instead of seeing ourselves as already having succeeded, these studies show that visualizing ourselves in the process of doing whatever is required in order that we achieve is far more effective. We need to imagine ourselves studying hard, training effectively, honing our skills, working in the studio, etc. This is known as, quote, process visualization as opposed to, quote, outcome visualization. I love that. That really picks me up.
Definitely. It's really good, and I think it's very true. I mean, it's something that I try and instill into my students, is that, you know, one of the most important things to focus on is not whether or not you're going to get the massive gig or you're going to get the signing from the label that you really want. It's like you want to focus on the process. Like, it should always be about the process. Do the process and the good things will come. It's like when you learn to drive a car, you don't go to an instructor and say, I want to learn how to drive from one end of the country to the other, and that's the only thing I'm learning. You learn to drive the car, you get good at the process, and then you can go wherever you want. I think that's really awesome. Be keen to read the book, man. Do you know what it's called?
Yeah, her book is called Fight, Win Freedom from Self-Sabotage by Hazel Gale. And yeah, I like the thought of just, you know, shifting the fantasy from the being on stage playing to thousands of people to instead fantasizing about just being in the studio, staying up, you know, romanticizing, staying up late at night, your face just illuminated by a screen, just working hour upon hour, working up that studio tan, and fantasize about that, about getting excited about music, about collaborating with people.
It's also just a really empowering way of looking at it, because it's something that you can definitely control. Yeah. You know for sure that you can put things in place in your life so that you can spend as many hours as you need to, as many days, as many years as you need to in the studio to get what you want. You can't control almost any other aspect of it. You can like influence it, and you can give yourself more luck, if you will, by sort of doing certain things to influence your situation. But you still don't know if you're going to get signed. You still don't know if you're going to get that gig, but you know that you can do that work to give you really, really, really good chances of that happening.
Hey guys, well, my question here today is like, how do you get from like locally listened track you make to like getting listened like internationally by labels, party makers and everything, you know? Because like, I think it's hard to get people to listen to your music. So like, I don't know, like there's labels who can promote your tracks and like give you more listens, but like, I don't know, it just feels like it is a bit difficult, even if you got like a good beat, made like a hit and a killer dance floor track to let people listen to it. So like, if you got advice about that, that's welcome. Thank you.
Jesse, great question. Yeah, getting your track out into the wider world. Well, there's a few things that can really help. A lot of it is about hustling in a way that you've not really sort of had to hustle in the studio. So one thing that I do, and one thing that a lot of my students have had success with, is being really clear on where you want to release. So labels don't have a lot of time. They're often very, very busy people, and you want to pick, I would say, go for 3 labels that you want to release on. Pick one which is like your ultimate all-time label, like the ultimate one for you. One which is a little bit further down the scale, and then one that's perhaps just a local label or is a friend's label that doesn't really, it might not have that much traction, but you can get releases on there. Then what I would do is make sure your tunes are up to scratch. So DJ them next to releases from these labels. Check them against reference tracks and releases from these labels. And if you can, find out who the rep is at these different labels, especially at the higher level ones, and craft them a very nice email, and just be persistent and just send your tracks to them and just say to them like, hey, look, I'm really keen on releasing on your label. Make sure you have a private SoundCloud page. The last thing that any sort of label owner wants to see is going to a page where there's already been 400 listens or whatever on a track. Make them feel special. Put your name, address, everything in the subject matter. Don't send them a track on something like WeTransfer that expires, and just be persistent. Sometimes you'll get a response, sometimes you won't get a response, but it's definitely a case of trying to get to know them a little bit, make sure that your music suits their label. The other thing that you can do is find blogs, go out and do a bunch of research and just send your tracks to essentially taste makers. There's a lot of different blogs out there for all different types of music, a lot of different music channels, and sending your stuff out to them will hopefully, if your track is good enough, they'll play it. That will start getting you some traction. But yeah, persistence and a bit of a personal touch in this day and age where, you know, everyone has access to the internet. Try and stand out a bit. If your tracks are good enough and you keep at it, you'll definitely start getting listens and response from that.
I agree with that. I would put the emphasis more on making the connection. And, you know, it's the old adage, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I just think this is true. So obviously you have to have good stuff. We're assuming that you've got stuff which is ready to rock. You've got, you know, it sounds like you're sitting there, you're thinking, I've got stuff which I know it's good enough. I know it's good enough. I know it. I've played it out. It's passed the tests, the various tests. I've played it on a dance floor, or someone's played it on a dance floor. Everyone went wild. It's good to go. It's done. Next, you need to make a connection with people. I think we're just wired to give preference to people that we have some sort of a connection with.
Absolutely.
And frankly, I hear a lot of outrage about stuff like this. Like, well, so-and-so, I sent him my stuff and he never got back to me and he should have listened to it because damn it, you know, I sent it to him. It's like, no, he shouldn't actually. There's no like... Yeah. No one owes you anything. And it's actually highly unlikely that you'll get a listen and a meaningful response if you just don't know this person. It's just the way we work. If a farmer needs some farm hands, he's going to go to his kids and his kids' friends, and he'll just give it, or she will just give them special preference. It's just the way it works, you know. And luckily, there's a huge forum for this. Weekly conventions where you can meet and greet with the biggest players in the industry. It's called the Party Scene. Obviously, if you go to Tomorrowland, you're not going to get easy access to the people playing there. But at your average club night, people like label managers are usually just sitting near the bar, just hanging out, and you can just go right up to them and talk to them. And that will... If you just have a chat with someone at a party, if you can just sort of bend their ear just for a minute and convey your passion and shake their hand, and you don't have to be a sort of larger than life character, you know, you don't need to be an extrovert, you don't need to like wow them with how funny and hilarious you are. We were chatting to Regan a while back, Regan from Nano Records, about this whole thing. And, you know, these guys just want to talk to people who are passionate about music. And you can be softly spoken, and you can be shy, you can be the person who's the next guy or girl who's going to be putting out music on their label is not necessarily the loudest voice in the room. They're just a person who's passionately working on music. So honestly, you have to meet people. Like, you just have to do it. You have to find these people. If you live in the middle of nowhere, then you're just going to have to get on a plane and just find these people and shake their hand. And once you got that connection, anything else can happen. You can go from there. But if you send them a message, they're going, oh, there's that guy I spoke to. And we're just wired to give preference. So I don't know. I find there's like a lot of backlash against the who you know thing, but it's just so human it's so human to respond better to people who we have some sort of familiarity with.
I think it's a combination of all of them, really.
Yeah.
You know, in the way that you were talking about making the connections, it's like if you've been sending a bunch of emails to a label and then you meet the label manager in a party and you're like, oh, hey man, you know, and you make that connection, that's gonna, combination of those things, I think is only gonna add to your chances.
Sure.
You know,
I'd meet the guy first, so you haven't already pissed him off with it.
What if you can't though? I mean, what if the label is, if I want to release on like European labels, or if I want to release on like an American label, like it's just not possible for me to go to the States for like 6 months to parties on the off chance that I'll meet a label manager.
Well, then,
you know what I mean?
You have to draw a link. I think like you have to draw a link to, Mr. Biggs, right? There's that band who's on his label and he chats with them, but then there's a band who knows them, and you got to kind of figure out a way of passing your stuff down the ranks, or up the ranks.
I think that meeting someone in person, if you can do it, is definitely the strongest way to do it. But I don't think it's not gonna work by being persistent with labels. I mean,
well,
it works.
You don't have to meet Mr. Big though. You can meet a DJ who's on Mr. Big's label, or you can meet his friend, or it's kind of working your way up the chain. And frankly, I mean, we're talking about the psytrance scene here. Generally, if you're trying to make it in the psytrance scene, if you're trying to get access to these people, they're worldwide. Someone like Regan or most label managers are DJs, and they're DJing all around the world all the time, and often at parties where you're getting pretty good access. So I just think that, like, if you live in rural China, it's gonna be really difficult. It is gonna be really hard. But assuming that you're living somewhere which has some semblance of a sort of scene, it's not going to be too long until you have your chance. Yeah. And you should be DJing as well. That is a tried and tested route. Just DJing.
Absolutely.
You can be like playing a bunch of professional music and then drop your track in. Yeah. Then you've got backstage access. And getting DJ sets is not that hard. So
absolutely.
The combination of getting DJ sets and just being in the places where the people you want to meet is, I mean, that, to me, that is the answer. I actually really like that question. I think that's going to be our caller of the week, and you've won a free copy of the Klevgrand Rôverb.
Well done. We will be contacting you outside of the show to send you your code for the awesome plugin.
Yep, thanks very much, Jesse. Okay, friends and lovers, next up is myself, catching up with the legendary Rôverb. Raj is best known these days as one half of the galactically celebrated group SHPONGLE, and is also the big boss at Tip Records. But his story doesn't begin there. Raj, welcome to the show.
Wow, awesome to be with you.
And you're joining us from London, right?
I'm right in Notting Hill Gate, where I've lived for the last 50 years in the same house.
Wow, okay. People might be listening thinking, wait, so you're both from London. Okay, London's like a tiny country, so that might explain why we're not in the same room.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're settled here. You're 50 years.
Right. I'm Australian. I've got an Australian passport. I go back there. I've got relatives there, whatever.
Right.
But when I came to England in the 60s, I fell in love with it and decided never to leave.
Okay, you've been around, man. Like, you've been around.
And I was in India in 1959. I was in a beach living there in the 60s. In 1960, I had 2 houses and was making the scene there. But, then I went to study jazz in New York. And it's been a long, long story of a lot of false ends and cul-de-sacs and wrong decisions. But finally finding my goddess, which was my silver flute.
Yeah.
And once my goddess, life, opened her arms.
You were doing flute from the beginning, right? Like, because you're doing conservatoire.
Yeah, and studied that. And then I went on a Greek island for 2 years with my wife and locked myself in a windmill and practiced scales and all that shit. And then I knew I could play with anybody. And I got back to London in the late 60s and put an advert in the paper and in Melody Maker and got 200 people rang up. And that was how we started Quintessence. And we went on to do the Royal Albert Hall, as you probably know, and the first Glastonbury Pyramid in 1971 or 72. And so that career went pretty fast for 3 years or 4 years, and we did 200 or 300 gigs and 6 albums. But I thought then my career was finished, and it was only 1973, and I had a daughter, and I thought, well, I've got to put food on the table, so I stopped music entirely. I didn't play for 7 years.
Right, because I was looking at your Wikipedia, and there's an intermediate bit, which is postfixed, by the way, by Citation Needed, which says basically that you gave it all up and became an envelope salesman.
Yes, that's exactly right. 1973, we'd just done the Albert Hall solo. It was like
Whoa.
the peak of the career. We'd done it twice before with Creedence Clearwater, but then we hired the Albert Hall, and on a Monday night before Christmas put on this quintessence show with sitars and dancers and everything. It was incredible.
You put on your own show.
Own show. We promoted it, hired it, made the posters, stuck them up, got the people there, and I think there were 6,000 people
Taking
turned
the
up.
power back.
Yeah, man. We wanted it to be guerrilla. We didn't want to give it to promoters and all that because we'd done all that and been ripped off by managers and all the old cliches you can ever think of. So there we were at the height of our power, and I went backstage and I said to the band, "I'm sorry, guys. It's all over now, baby blue," and disbanded the band. We'd gone as far as we could go musically, spiritually, artistically, 5 or 6 albums, blah, blah, Island Records, RCA. It was a long, weird trip, but there I was. I had no money coming in, and I decided everybody uses envelopes. So I went to Sweden or somewhere, bought like 10 million envelopes, and then sold them gradually down Harley Street, walking around to selling stuff and just trying to earn a living with my wife. And I did until about 1980. I did that. And then I had a road to Damascus moment where I threw up my arms and said, "This is ridiculous." What?
Wait. So were you just sitting there thinking, like, what does everybody need? There's just an envelope on the table, and you're like, envelopes.
Yeah, exactly. Very limited things. I wanted to be self-employed.
Yeah.
And we did do a few other things that we advertised in newspapers, and we made our money legally, and we had our house. The rent here was £5 a week. I mean, we were in those days. It was the halcyon hippie days of Ladbroke Grove, which still exists today in a way. So there we were. So I did all that, and then I realized, at the end of the envelope thing, my daughter was growing up. She was 7 or 8, and everything was going fine. I was in London. I thought, hey, man, it's time to get back into music. And then I had to think, what is the direction of where to go? And I knew years back that synthesizers were the way. And I rushed down to Chelsea, and I bought myself a CX5 Yamaha computer. I bought myself 600 sequential circuits and a Sony this and a Roland that, put them all in the room, MIDI'd them all up, and then spent 5 years in my living room downstairs trying to work out what this thing about electronic music. I was going out to clubs and enjoying all of that scene, but I wanted to make this music, and it was sort of hard to find people at that time to make it. It was like, how do you meet these people?
I feel like we've skipped a bit here. So how did you actually find electronic music? Where was the moment where was it a slow, organic thing? Because you were always making psychedelic music.
Well, it was always psychedelic in the respect that I was psychedelic and I was playing the flute, which is a fairly psychedelic instrument because it's not down, you're improvising and all of that. But it was when the band broke up, I actually felt that, this is 73, that the way forward would be to form a band like Santana, conga drums, lots of synthesizers, and go in that direction. And that sort of stayed with me, that sort of concept that everybody wants really good funky rhythm, but we want to hear sounds from the other planets. We want to hear sounds from outer space, the sounds that we're not hearing on presets. And so then I started buying all that gear and learning how to use it. I was never very technical. I'm still useless at all that stuff. That's why I always hang around with people who know what to do. It's always up to your game if you play with someone better, like Simon Posford or Rick Thomas. Anyhow, so that's how we started in the 80s and sniffing around to work out what would be the next step. And, of course, the next step was going to India, to Goa, and hearing the new sound that had emerged from Well, it was very pop in the mid-'80s, but then it got into the new beat, the front 2, 4/2, and all of that. And that was quite a big influence, because it was like, wow, you don't have to be poor to be Jesus. No sex before marriage, and all these crazy samples and beats and stuff. And I was in Goa, and it was like, at that moment, the whole world axis of electronic music got a complete spin around. And from 89, 90, 91, that's when it really, people started being very inventive. There were people like Merv from Eat Static, and there was Astral Projection. There were many, many others, and that was the birth of this music. And one often thinks it was sort of commercial, but in no way it was commercial. I mean, the parties were open to anyone if you had the right attitude. If you had the wrong attitude, you didn't get to go to those parties. And there were parties every night, and every night you'd hear another 50 new tunes, and you'd think to yourself, who's making this music? You know, drugs do they take? Which country do they work in? What equipment do they have? This is weird shit going down, and I'm not part of it. I want to be part of this.
I totally feel you there. Like when I first started going to parties, this was the Liquid Connective days, about 10 years later, and I was sitting there, and I won't lie and say I was totally sober. It's my entry to psychedelic everything. And sometimes at some point during the evening or the morning, I'd remind myself that this music, it's not being randomly generated by some supercomputer. There's actually someone sitting there at a flat in Sheffield or something making it. I'm like, what kind of evil genius actually creates this wacky experience I'm having? It felt mostly benevolent, but sometimes very sneaky.
Yeah, well, there were scary tracks. I was listening to a couple the other day. Someone sent me an old Goa tape, and they had these German tapes. And in the middle of the night, about 4 o'clock, when everyone was seriously off their box, there would be these samples, and you wouldn't know what. And they're saying, "They stinken, schlachen, chicken, Birnenflaps," and you'd say, "What the fuck? What did he say?" Yeah, you stacken. And this would go on, and you'd think, they could be telling me to kill my mother. I mean, what's going on? But the tracks were great, and I listened to them the other day, and they still brought goosebumps up on my. I still didn't understand a word they were saying, but there was a spirit then of adventure, and everybody had their own sound, and everybody was going along their own path, and no one had the same synths. It was all completely jumbled up, and out of that chaos of the 90, it evolved into something quite special.
Yeah, and the whole world was going electronic. I mean, you had industrial, so the rock scene was doing that. Hip hop was going electronic. Pop was already electronic. So it was like the
loads of synthesizers rounds, like my big influences, like the Thompson Twins and people in the early 80s, those sort of commercial bands, Blancmange, and they had and it was like, wow, these sounds are wicked. Where can you buy them? And then you'd buy the synth, and you would realize you really had to program them because everyone was using the same presets, and that's where it started becoming interesting, where you could be creative. And then I met Graham Wood, who we started Infinity Project, and this guy was a genius. He didn't even play the computer, but within 2 weeks, he had learned how to work a computer, write on the computer, program a computer. He just had one of those minds that could do amazing things from nothing. You'd give him one little Casio, he could get a sound out of it that was incredible. So yeah, that was an exciting time.
Okay, so, and then you went on to start Tip Records.
Yeah, a few years later, like 93, 94, I was standing in a field in the rain, and I thought, it'd be really nice to bring out that track I just made with Graham. I thought, well, why couldn't I bring it out? Why wouldn't I? And the rain was coming down, and someone was coming saying, Raj, you okay? I was like, yeah, man, just leave me alone. Right, and start a record company. What do you need to start a record company? Well, you'd have to sell 500 records probably. Yeah. And but that's easy. I'm going to buy those 500 records. I'll make the 500, I'll buy the 500, and I'll have a record company. That's exactly what happened. And we started out together, but I ended up by myself and just went with Tip Records, and we've had over 1,000 releases. You know the story.
Yeah.
going strong. This year is going to be our best year. So, like, it's amazing how things work out, but you've got to meet the right people. You've got to have a lucky breaks. It wasn't because I was super talented. It was because I was hungry. I had left Australia, and here I was in this land of plenty, the UK, with all these fantastic musicians. I mean, there were 40,000 bands on the road in 1969 when we were playing with Quintessence.
Sure.
The competition, was everyone was in a band.
It is actually really great to hear your story. Any story where someone's had a vision and realized it is always inspiring. I would like to know a little bit more about you, because you're a collaborator, right?
Yeah, a lot.
Would you ever do anything solo? Or what would that sound like? Like a gun to your head, you have to write a track on your own right now.
It's easy. I mean, for me, the music never stops. It's like it's something that's there all the time. So what I've got to hone in on is an image. It's usually with Simon, when I'm working with SHPONGLE, we never write any music down. We never talk technically, even though we both read music and all of that. It's a concept. It's a feeling. Like I'll say, okay, in blissful awareness, there's a lake there, and the mountains are reflected in the moon and the sky, and then there's a ripple in the lake, and there's something coming out of the lake, and so there's a story develops, and so you musically attach different chords and different moods to that story. So could I do something by myself? Probably I could, but it would be probably pretty useless. As I said, it's much better to work with people like Rick Tum and Simon Posford and those guys, because I can tell them something and immediately they'll get it. Like with Rick Tum, we'll walk in, he'll say, what track do you want to do? What are we going to do today?
Yeah.
We've got a blank canvas, and within maybe 60 seconds, we'll be off.
Yeah.
And it's like jumping on the train. The train's always moving. You've just got to wait for the right moment to jump onto the creative train. And that creative train, then you merge your energies with his ideas, with your Chicago, whoever's there.
Yeah.
And you build up this extraterrestrial spaceship.
I totally feel you on that visual thing. It's something I developed myself since forever, but again, having psychedelic experiences made everything incredibly visual.
Yeah.
And after that, it was sort of like, what is it going to sound like? It's more like, how does it look? How does it feel? It was like a multi-sensory kind of thing, and it sounds a bit wacky, but it's literally to this day how I still, like, without that I'm just a naked fetus in a room. I've got nothing. But that visual thing, I think, is incredibly important. It's a very personal. If you listen to our last podcast, I'm actually telling people who have, or suggesting to people who have writer's block, to just remember experiences which turn them on.
Yeah, that's good advice. The creative process is it's an interesting process. It's like, you go from group to group, from project to project, because you can't express everything with one group. You can't express everything with SHPONGLE, because you need to have the 3 o'clock in the morning dance music. So you put yourself into I'm a little older now with a cane, but dancing was for 10 years, I didn't DJ or anything. All I wanted to do is dance and sweat and dance and dance and dance. And then you start to think, what makes you dance? Why does some things lift your heart up and make you feel cosmic, and other things really bring you down? Is it the keys? Is it the notes? Is it the intervals of sound? You have to analyze this, but it all comes from you. I mean, it always comes back to the point you only can play what you are. You only can do as good as you can do. And the idea is to keep expanding yourself as a human being, rather than thinking about the music or the technicalities, or whether you can play an F sharp diminished chord in perfect time. All that's irrelevant. The feeling is we're all unique. We're all so special. We're our fingerprint, our snowflake. It's proven to us we are unique. So in that unique way, we try to bring something unique to everybody and share it, because the whole fun of this music thing is going around the world and seeing how this little small smoldering fire grew into a bonfire, which it is now. You can't go anywhere in the world without feeling trance, or the other mediums too. But speaking about trance, it will never be gigantic, but it started off with dozens and now there are millions.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how it's going. And the concerts, of course, that's one of the important things, gigging around the world and seeing what the attendances are like. Is it falling away? Is it like garage or drill or hip hop or whatever the thing is? Has it reached its peak and it's now going to be redundant? No, it's never going to reach its peak because we haven't even started yet. I mean, going for 25 years. I mean, compare that to jazz or compare that to opera or classical, which took hundreds of years. We've been going for a cluster of years and we've developed very fast because of the computers and because of the drugs. It's accelerated everything to hyper speed, and that's how we're traveling right now. It doesn't mean it's good, but it just means it's traveling really fast. Now what we're going to do is refine it and become, all of us, better artists. What we do, whether you play the guitar or whistle or whatever, we're on the path, and we're on the path in this giant tribe together.
Yeah,
and that's what. Beautiful. You can play with Joe, you can play with Leon or your old friends or your new friends, or meet me and play, and the music's our common language. And that's why for all your listeners and all the stuff you're involved in the best possible source of enjoyment in the universe, apart from maybe a few right. But music is the thing that's taking us there. That's our refuge. It's our goal.
Yeah.
It's where come from, it's where we're going. It's just a fantastic privilege to be involved in this thing and meet like-minded people around the world.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And you've said something a couple of times during our chat which struck out to me. So you said that you're not very technical, and yet you're extremely musical. And okay, so you work with people who may be a little bit more like geeky au fait with computers or whatever. But, I was actually chatting to a friend of mine yesterday who's actually a very successful musician, but he only uses machines, like, this machine? It's like a Native Instruments thing. And he was asking me for advice on stuff, and he doesn't even use a DAW. And he was straight up, he was like, I don't really know much about music technology, but he's made a living off of making incredible music. And he's doing really well on Spotify now, and he doesn't even really know what's going on at all, but it's not important. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because people are starting to say to me, do I think that people are getting too technological now and leaving the music behind a bit too much? I mean, there's always going to be criticism of what's going on right now, but I think it is so important to stay musical outside the digital box.
Well, I mean, you get the first 100 DJs you meet, just pick 100 at random and get them into a room and then ask them to pick up an instrument and play me a tune right through and improvise on that tune. Maybe 1 or 2 out of 100 can do that because we're not versed in wanting to learn live musical instruments. It's too much trouble. It's like learning a language. I've spent a long time practicing the flute under motorways for hours and missing my gigs, job, getting up early, practicing, becoming one with your instrument, falling in love with your instrument. Then you're musical. And of course, if you bring a live instrument with technology, it's a more powerful tool because you've got the feeling. There is no synthesizer alive in the world today that can reproduce the flute embouchure sounds, breathing, legato, portamento, tonguing. I mean, there's a million. It's true with guitars too. I mean, if you learn an instrument and you play that instrument well, and then you merge it in with an electronic group, man, you've really got something cooking there because you've got it from the heart, and you've also got the beat and the timing and the technology is important. We've all got to keep going with technology. Things are improving all the time. The desks, the mics, everything. But the thing that will only improve with practice is you locking the door, turning off your phone, and doing your scales, whatever, or however you want to learn your instrument. For me, I had to learn scales for years and years and years, because now I can play with anybody around the world. You go to a tribe in Africa and some weird music is playing, you pick up your flute, I can play with those guys.
You know the scale, yeah.
It's just sound. I mean, that's what it's all about.
Learning the modes really opened that up for me. That was my big whoa moment, you know?
It's a major, and that's what we're still doing, those modes. It's what Miles Davis, there's no limit to. Ravi Shankar, there were 13,000 ragas, but they were all parts of the mode, you know? It's like, so that's a whole other thing of which most people aren't interested in. But if you're a musician, you want to know the modes. You want to know each note in the scale and what that note, you know, is it the king note? Is it the blue note? Is it the sad note? Is it the queen of the note? And you learn these things about scales and notes and sounds, and then you start putting them together like an artist. You get a palette and you mix up the colors. Anybody can get the colors, but can you be a Leonardo da Vinci? That's the problem. You're using the same brushes and the same paint. Why is one guy can cook a meal, fantastic meal, and another guy, you give him the same ingredients, he ruins the meal? It's exactly the same with the music. I mean, we don't want to ruin the meal. We want to have a banquet, a feast for the world.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I think the flute is such a wildly expressive one as well, you know. I mean, my first thing with flute was on Hendrix's Electric Ladyland. I think it's Chris Wood does his flute solo, and it's and by the end of it, it's he's barely even playing it, more just blowing on it. He's like really blasting that thing. And I was like, it's such a human instrument.
It's very close to the voice, the flute, out of all the instruments. So you get that thing, but you know, Jethro Tull showed you there were so many different ways of blowing the flute, and certain jazz guys, and we all develop our own sort of style. But when I heard that, I'd played other instruments really badly, guitar and drums, and you probably know trombone and all sorts of things, but really bad. I was atrocious, and I just had no talent. And then I was just walking down Collins Street in Melbourne, and coming out of the shop window was this flute. I don't know who was playing it. One of the guys. If I could learn just to play one tune on that instrument in my life, I will die happy. Of course, you learnt the tune and then you wanted more and more and more. But that was falling in love, man. And that's how music is with us. I'm sure it's the same. You love music. You love sound. You love the whole thing about it. Yeah, and it's not the only thing in one's life, but it's an important thing, and it's a wonderful thing that you can share, even just jamming with somebody, just two people. How many hours spent just guitar and flute, you know, out in a paddock somewhere in Australia, just jamming, just play one chord, man. We'll just work on that for
zero agenda. Just it's you're truly living in the present when you're just playing music with someone, you know. It's like we're in this constant, people always saying, oh, live in the present, man, live in the present. And it's like when you're working on deadlines, my life is largely about deadlines and what's next, and could I have been better in the past or whatever. But when you're just sitting there playing music with someone, you're truly living in the present, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to get your help with a question that a caller had, which is that he was just saying that when my music is ready, how do I get it out to a label? And that's obviously a bit of a big one. But just quickly, like if someone had some amazing music, they played it out, it was really rocking, it was tip ready, how would that person get you to hear it?
It's not a unique question, but it's a unique problem. How do you do it? Right. I get every day music sent to me, and it's really difficult because everybody wants feedback and they want you to, or they want it to be on tip. And it's a huge responsibility that I really can't shoulder anymore. It's just my life is so busy, and to reply to all these things. So I funnel quite a lot of things to Lucas, who's our label manager and who can make decisions about it. But the truth of it is, speaking first of all in two parts, to get on tip, is extremely difficult. Why? We're releasing now less and less. Our strategy is less releases, higher quality, and everything we release goes in number one, and that's how we're going to keep it. So as far as even releasing my own stuff, like another stash bag or something, I can't, because we've got Astral Projection, we've got Lucas, we've got 1,200 mics. So this year's like booked out. So if someone sends us any music, even friends of mine, good friends, tip DJs, in fact, I have to say to them, there's no space on the label. So then, in answer then to your second thing, well, how do you do it? How do you get into it? Well, I've always thought the best way of getting into the business and the whole thing is meeting people. And the way you meet people is you go out to the clubs where they play this music, you meet the DJs, you persevere, you hassle people, you write to people. If you're good enough, if your music is good enough, you will definitely be published and get out there, because there's a lack of really, really inspired stuff. The 98% of everything released is very mediocre, including myself too. It takes a lot to raise that bar and bring something new to the table. How do we bring something new? Better samples, better introductions, better rhythms, change those bass lines. Everybody's using the same bass lines. Everybody's using the same tempos. Everybody's using the same drugs. You've got to break the mold somehow and approach this thing in a musical way, in an intelligent way. How do you meet people? I used to send my tapes to Brian Eno. He never wrote back to me once, ever. I did everything, man. I used to just try everything and try everybody, and then I finally met Youth from Butterfly Studios and sort of got in the back door that way. But it takes a lot of perseverance and a lot of no's and a lot of cul-de-sacs, and you've just got to have incredible faith that you can go on. A lot of people I know have got to a good position and they've dropped out of the scene entirely. They've just got to a certain, and they were earning a living from that, but they just couldn't take it because it's too much sacrifice. The wives are at home alone. The kids are growing up without a dad. It's a big commitment to be a trance. That's all I know about a trance DJ, because you're going to be in the studio or you're going to be earning money from your gigs, and that's the only way you'll earn money. As far as earning money from records, you have to sell 1,000 Spotify hits in order to earn $10 or whatever it is. I mean, it's absurd. The only way you can really do stuff is go out there and gig and bring out your own music and do what I did. Form a record company, bring out your own stuff if you believe in it. It doesn't cost that much to do it. You register a company for 15 quid down at company's house, and there you got your record company. And you can take other people and you can bring out your own stuff or not do anything at all. I mean, the opportunities in this country are vast because it's a musical country and there's so much talent. But to get to that talent, you'll find that everybody who's reached the top have really made sacrifices, enslaved their guts out and gone through a lot of really heavy stuff without being too dramatic. But you know the music business, it creates a lot of tsunamis along the way, and it can break you, it can make you, but go to where the action is. Go where the parties are. Go to Ross's parties. That's what we used to do down at the Arches and hang around with. I saw him last week at Boomtown. He put us on there. You just keep meeting people and asking and loving it, and eventually it will break through. But the main thing is never stop. Don't become an envelope salesman. Stuff.
Hey, it worked out for you.
It really bad. Don't do that, man. Just have faith and think, the sound will get me there. It's like we're all on this path together. It's a communal path we're on. It's a giant tribe. We're all finding our way, and there's a lot of young kids coming up, and there is a lot of talent. When I say there's not a lot of good music, there is a lot of good music. It's just that it's amongst everything else. I mean, Israel is producing some amazing music right now, and so are many other countries, and so are many other people who've never done it before, like from Slovenia or Belgrade or the Middle East or Czechoslovakia or Poland. There are names coming in, and Sweden, the guys are really talented. So I wish I could accommodate everybody, but I can't. But the advice is keep doing it, man, and keep rocking and keep happy.
Yeah, I think you got to be patient, and you know, it's like the sort of the record system or the release label world is in constant coordination with, you got talent in, talent out, but is it good stuff going in, the same stuff that's coming out? It's constantly trying to coordinate.
I mean, the labels like Nano, who have been extremely successful and they've only had a short time, they're bringing out amazing variety music and 4 or 5 releases a week, it seems. You know, they've really got that scene covered, and they're super nice guys, Regan, the whole crew, and people should send their music into them because they're certainly looking for new sounds and new groups. And there are still quite a few trance labels around, but you have to sort of sort them out and find out what's going on for you. Where does your music fit? You know, what sort of when are you going to play? When am I going to listen to it?
Yeah,
in the afternoon, or is it going to be at 1 o'clock at night? You know, there's a difference. I do it a lot. You know, I mean, SHPONGLE is probably our most success. We haven't spoken much about it, but, you know, SHPONGLE was one of those divine Damascus moments too, just like Quintessence was. I saw Quintessence at the beginning. I thought, it's so simple. You just hire a place and put a strobe up and a black light, and that's exactly what we did. And before we knew it, it took off. And with SHPONGLE, we had no idea. We just were at Glastonbury and decided to do a track at Youths, and Rumours of Vapors came out, and we came out with this new sound, and it was like, you know, where's this sound been all this time? You know, where was it hiding? And it was like, it wasn't in Simon Posford's head, it was in both our heads. Yeah. And it was like Coca-Cola, 2 magic recipes. Not that we draw any similarities to Coca-Cola, but the 2 mystic elements came in and produced something beyond what he could do and something beyond what I could do. And we really, you know, it's been such a journey, man.
You say that, and when I first became aware of SHPONGLE and sort of your history and his history, I mean, my first instinct was like, what is Raj? I mean, I hear the flute, but like, is he also twiddling? Because it's kind of quite technical music. And then when I saw you play, I was like, oh, you're like the inspiration, like the energy. Just watching you play, I was like, oh, okay, so I can totally hear your spirit and personality in the music, bar to bar.
Yeah, and thank you for that. It's whatever you do, I always feel it's not good enough. You know, I really honestly believe that. It's like you do your best, and
that's why you're still doing it.
Yeah, but I hear people who can really do it, you know, the people who I worship, you know, and when I hear them, whether they're Indian flautists or Western flautists, you know, I have my heroes as much as anybody else, and you sit back and you just think, oh shit, you know, I'm so lucky to be in this position, you know, just to be able to do what I do, where there are geniuses out there, really geniuses who may be struggling right now, who knows, but a lot of it's luck and a lot of it's just having fun. You know, it's like, it's the most fun you can have, you know, creating music and playing it to your friends. I don't think there's anything better than that. I haven't come across it yet.
Absolutely. It's definitely where I've always felt, even that just a 1 hour on stage, that's like, this is me. This is, okay, all the other stuff I've been saying wasn't it. Yeah. This is it. This is who I am.
And we've got this concert coming up next year in Red Rocks. You probably heard.
Oh, you're playing Red Rocks. Dude, dream venue.
Yeah, I mean, we've done it about 4 years ago. It'll be 5 years ago exactly to the day since we were played there. For me, in my 50 years of playing around the world and all thousands of parties, without a doubt, it is the venue of the venue in the best place, geographically, topographically, altitude-wise, visual, acoustics, and it's legal. And I'm in Colorado. My God, what more could you want? It's like God has placed this place down on the ground. It's phenomenal.
And you're sort of very, very confronted by the audience, right? They're kind of vertically spanned in front of you.
Yeah, it's very steep, and you're up a mile high anyhow in the Rockies. You're built into the side of the Rockies, so on either side of the stage are the mountains. And then miles away in the distance is Nevada, lights are flickering, and you're out there completely in the open with this amazing stage and amazing crew and lights and everything else. So we've been offered a lot of gigs in America and around the world, but I said to them, no, the only place I'll go back is Red Rocks, and it's taken this long to get 2 nights, Friday and Saturday, which they don't usually allow you. But we said, come on, this will probably be our last SHPONGLE ever. So we might as well go for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you feel like the natural evolution of it is coming to a point where you're going to do other stuff, or?
It's not doing other stuff. It's that gigging is complicated. It's such a big crew and everything else, though it's wonderful when it happens, but it's not like a party. It's like, a Kumbh Mela. It's just this thing. And really approaching my 80s now, I really think the way forward for me is more in the studio. I'll do a few gigs here and there, but really I've done so many gigs and so many years, and it's like we've done 6 SHPONGLEs and we're now going to start the 7th one, and that's what's exciting me. 1,200 mics, of course. We just got another album coming out later this year, and that's something that I never stop laughing when I walk into the studio, the Rictum, until the day I walk out. One is hysterical but exhausted, and that's fun. A completely different world, 1,200 mics. But so I'll be pursuing that and continuing making music with those guys, and that's the future. And have a home life and be with my grandchild and live in Ladbroke Grove, and the sun is shining and everything is possible and life is wonderful.
I can't think of a better way to wrap up today. Raj, it's been amazing catching up with you, man. It's been amazing hearing your story.
So I'm really pleased to meet you, even like digitally. It's a great introduction, and I'm sure we'll meet and we'll be at parties together and we'll have a lot more conversations. But I wish you and your listeners and all the people working with you every success. If I can answer any questions, again, you can always email me or something and we can get specific, or Facebook me. I'm pretty on the case there. Love to share what I know or find out what I don't know from your friends. And it's all pretty exciting stuff right now. Yeah.
Right on, man. Woo. All right. We'll catch up soon, yeah?
Yes, man. We'll speak soon.
All right.
Love, love, love. Woohoo.
All right, bye. And that was Rajaram, everybody. I've got a weird sort of buzz from that conversation, like I just need to take a walk around the block or something. Kind of come back down to earth. What a dude. But not before we take some more questions coming up. And so our next caller really didn't want to leave us a voice message, but that's cool. That's cool. He has written the following. Hey Alex and Sam, so I've just come to the end of a couple months of buying my first lot of new gear, and I'm now nicely set up with a new computer, some nice monitors, a bit of acoustic treatment, an RME interface, and a controller. I've got about a couple of grand left over, and I'd like to get your take on what gear I should be looking at now for making side trance. Maybe a new synth, like a Nord or something, or maybe just upgrade my computer with new plugins. What do you think, guys? Thanks.
Yeah, great question. I would say definitely take the money that you have and use that to buy yourself more time or opportunities.
Yes.
So what I mean by that is don't buy any more gear, don't buy any more synths, none of that. If you've got a couple of grand, take the month off work and either spend that time in the studio or put yourself in a situation where you're meeting people, you're giving yourself opportunities. Spend that time hustling for gigs, spend that time hustling for releases. The last thing that you need is another $2,000 synth that's going to take you 6 months to learn. If I could go back, I would definitely spend less money on gear and give myself more time to do more things. That would be my suggestion 100%.
I couldn't agree with you more, yeah. Often we feel like we're investing by spending money on stuff. I've seen it a lot. I've been to a lot of studios, incredible things with amazing gear by people who didn't know how to use half of it. I think we can make ourselves feel like we're investing in our careers by buying gear. Buying gear does not make you a better producer. No. The same people will say, oh, it's just finding the time. Spend the money on the time. Dude, 100%. Yeah. That's pretty much what I spend all my money on. Is just time. No, it is. It's just like, you know, I'm not a rich guy, but like all the money I get, I just spend on taking time off, doing all my stuff and just sitting there working on music. No questions answered. So obviously you need to have a lifestyle. You need to have a kind of job where you can do that. But if you're aspiring to be a professional, you're going to have that lifestyle at some point anyway. Take, for instance, my partner, I know, she's a photographer. She rubs shoulders with like National Geographic and Magnum photographers. Some of these people work super corporate jobs for like a couple years and save up tons of money. And then they just take 2 years off. And what they achieve in that time is like incredible.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Money for time, 100%.
Hey, Alex, Sam. My name's Andy. I'm from Melbourne, Australia. I was wondering if you could do a masterclass with absolutely any artist, dead or alive, from any genre. Who would you choose?
Love that question. And it's a hard one. You know, people are always like, if you could invite 5 famous people, dead or alive, to a dinner party, I'm always like, my head just explodes because I'm like, okay, so like I have Jimi Hendrix and like Albert Einstein, but I don't really care about Einstein. Yeah, I have 2 answers because you said dead or alive. I'd say one dead and one alive. The guy not with us anymore would be Cosma, because he seemed like a really chill dude, and his music was so fresh and his melodic approach was so inspiring. He was on the cutting edge of trance at his time. I would have loved to just sit next to the dude and just ask him questions and get his approach on stuff. My living guy who I would love to have a masterclass with would be Edo, aka Domestic. Yes, he's done a lot of music as Domestic. I love a lot of it. You know, a lot of music goes through him, and he is a top-notch, I would say probably the best to my knowledge, sort of mixing and mastering engineer. He gets it. He's got that ear that just gets it. His kicks and basses, his mix downs are just, they represent, to me, if you want to talk about a posh, top-notch production mix down, it's Edo. I don't think he gives it away, so I've never even hit him up for it. If word got to me that, he'd love to do a class and he's going to show you everything, I'd be like, okay, I'm on the next plane. I don't think he's giving it away.
It's quickly, Edo, if you're listening, send us an email. Dead. I can't help but just say Prince. I just want to get into the studio with Prince, man. Like, what would that be like? I just think that'd be absolutely incredible. I know he's not a producer as such or, known for it, but just to sort of work with that guy, I don't know. It would just be incredible. And in terms of a live, I'm going to say right now, is actually DJ Rum or Drum.
Yes.
His new album, I just don't even know how that happens. It's just incredible. Have you heard it? Have you heard the new release?
Portraits of Firewood or something it's called?
Yeah, man. I just, his blending of like orchestral and drum and bass jungle influences, and then just all this amazing soundscape. So yeah, those would be my picks at the moment.
Yeah,
for sure.
I also want to know how he's doing things.
Yeah.
It's very psychedelic stuff, actually. To me,
psychedelic.
To me, it's psychedelic in a way I've never heard before. The way he's like, he'll like have one melody going, and then the next section will be like the same melody but interpreted in a whole new soundscape. So it's like he's got that kind of orchestral consistency and like an idea that gets passed from section to section but keeps being reinterpreted, and then you're like, oh shit, like that drum break is now referencing that melody. Oh fuck, it's
and where does he find his samples, man? Like, because he samples everything. The samples literally sound like they are made for the track. I don't know if you've ever tried to dig for orchestral samples on vinyl. It's not easy. You find so much crap. It's like all perfectly isolated, and it just sounds exactly like it was meant for that. So it's highly recommended. Very psychedelic, and just ridiculous stuff.
Yeah, people are asking us like, what do we listen to outside Psytrance to get inspiration? DJ Rum or Drum.
100%.
Yeah. But if you go to Facebook
Yeah.
and just type in DJ Rum or YouTube or something, it's just like really, really cool shit.
You'll find it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay, so the good folks at Klevgrand have sent us a copy of the Rôverb, which I'm almost definitely not pronouncing properly. I really struggle with those Scandinavian words. But the Rôverb, which we gave to our caller of the week, and I'm also going to be taking a quick look at it today at a mere $39.99. It's a super reasonably priced reverb and delay unit, or as it calls itself, a multi-delay line space machine, which sounds terrifically more fun. One of the first standout points is that it's designed for both computer and tablet, the latter of which comes in at just a penny under $4. So anyone out there who's got an iPad or something integrated into their live setup, it's worth taking note. Reverb basically consists of a sort of baseball field shaped arena around which you drag little dots, and each dot represents one delay line. As you change the shape and size of the dots, it affects the feedback and tonality of that one delay. Moving their position around the screen changes their left and right position in the stereo field. Where this gets really fun and interesting is where you can have up to 50 dots, so you can have a sort of cluster of dots all around the left and right space, and then you can start getting some actually very reverb-like sort of sounds. What I'm going to show you today is I'm just going to run you through the presets real quick, and then I'm going to show you the simple way which I would actually use this in a musical setting. So let's just run through the presets, and I'm just going to be using my Treehouse pluck from my new Echotronic Bank for Serum, which sounds like this. And if we play with the macros, that kind of silliness. Okay, and I have turned the auto pan and reverb off on that, by the way. Let's get the Rôverb going, and this is on the Bright Ambience preset. It's got a cool little built-in EQ. And then we have the nice hall. So it's a nice sort of combination of reverb and delay there. We have the robot sizer. So let's play with the EQ. Now I can actually take all of these and control them together. I can drag them around, pan them around the stereo field. Pan them to the other side. I like that. You're basically just dragging dots around a space and making these lovely sounds with it. So it's quite sort of hands-on and quite fun. We've got just a few more. We've got this spring reverb. Let's bring the wetness up. So it'd be probably quite fun to sort of automate there. We've got a small drum room. This is a small complex room. So apart from the kind of cool results you can have by just dragging and dropping these dots around the screen, I would probably use this mostly to add a subtle bit of say left and right sort of stereo interest and area around a sound. I'm always looking for ways to add a little bit of, I just call it in my mind like area, like when you have a very simple sound and it sounds almost too dry and simple for a mix. I love little ways of just adding kind of particles to a sound. to just subtly give it a bit more weight and size, so it doesn't sound quite so simple. So I'm going to just add one dot to the left area of the spectrum. Now I can adjust the decay time and size. It's a very quick way of making a stereo delay. And sometimes that's all you want. Sometimes you just want a little bit on the left or the right. Let's have a little bit coming in on the right here as well. And I could just make a couple more clusters. I mean, just that already is a very quick way of just adding a little bit of sort of stereo magic to a sound. And I probably have kind of quite short feedbacks. Sometimes, when you're mixing and playing around and making new sounds, simple, quick little things like this, it's not grandiose, it's not taking the sound to the new dimension, it's just making it slightly bigger. And because of the quick and fun interface, it's the kind of thing I really would grab when I'm working on a sound, just to make it bigger without having to sort of fiddle with knobs. It's very hands-on, which makes it kind of quite inviting to just use quite quickly. So yeah, I would recommend this as a quick and unique way of adding delay and reverbs to your sound, and just having a bit of fun with a delay plugin. Thanks very much to the guys at Klevgrand. So snazzy little reverb plugin there. It's kind of like a reverb delay hybrid thing.
Yeah, it's awesome. Big shout out for Klevgrand for that one. Yeah, it's a really, really cool plugin. I just saw it and I was like, yeah, we have to give that away. Yeah, I think that's about it from us. So thanks again for all of your calls, and keep them coming. We will do our best to answer all of them.
Thanks again to R0verb for joining us today and sparking some energy certainly into my day. So we'll catch up with you next time. I've been Alex.
I've been Sam.
All right, see you guys next time. Bye.
See you later, guys. Bye-bye.